Good afternoon. If we're all ready, we'll
right.
call the meeting to order, please. Salina City Planning Commission. We'll begin with our consent agenda. The first thing is approval of our summary minutes of the last meeting, December 20th.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion? If not, all in favor vote aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our public hearing item tonight is number 3.1, application Z16-9, filed by John Amador, requesting a change in zoning classification from single-family residential to light industrial. This is addressed as 1117 Van Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application that has been received from a contract purchaser who has a contract to purchase 3 lots that have been owned historically by the Beard family. And the property that we're talking about here is located in the Fairway subdivision, and the Fairway subdivision encompasses only the north side of Van Horn Street. It was platted in 1939. Most of the homes constructed on Van Horn predate our city building records. The property that is the subject of this application has been owned by the Beard family and was occupied by a house and several outbuildings. The outbuildings were removed in 2006. There was a proposal to place a modular home on the property. The permit was applied for, but expired, and no home was ever placed on the property. In 2014, the dwelling on this property, which was in a dilapidated condition, was demolished. This is not part of the Cloverdale addition, but this neighborhood area has generally been referred to as the Cloverdale area or Cloverdale neighborhood, and it consists of 3 gravel streets that extend east from Ohio: Woodland, Prospect, and Van Horn. And this area contains a mix of residential and industrial uses that is probably unique within the city of Salina. Despite the fact that we have a lot of residential zoning in this area, there has not been any recent residential construction or redevelopment in this area. The owner, or the prospective owner here, is the owner of 3J's Steam Cleaning, and he has a contract to purchase lots 6, 7, and 8 on the north side of Van Horn. The property measures 203 feet east-west by 122 feet deep, so it has 24,766 square feet. It's the applicant's belief that this is more suitable for light industrial than residential use, and he would like to purchase the property and construct a metal building to house his steam cleaning business. The proposed building would be 30 by 60 feet. Because the property is currently zoned R, single family residential, that proposal would not be allowed, and so this request has been filed requesting the rezoning of those 3 lots to I-2 light industrial. I think you are familiar with the requirements of the I-2 district. The 2 things that are notable in I-2 compared to our other zoning districts is parking lots and driveways in I-2 zoned areas must be surfaced with an all-weather material, but they do not have to be paved. And then the other aspect is that in our I-2 and I-3 districts, there is not a requirement that front yard areas be landscaped. If we look at this and the suitability of the site for development under the requested zoning, the first thing we have to do is look at the history of this area. And Dustin, I don't know if you could put up the colored zoning map. So this could at best be described as a checkerboard pattern. If you look at this area, the yellow represents residential zone property. The gray represents I-2 zone property. If you step back and go back to 1977, when the Planning Commission comprehensively rezoned and remapped the city, this entire area was yellow zoned residential and it did contain some existing businesses that were made non-conforming uses. So we did have businesses that were grandfathered, but the homes were protected from commercial expansion. Since that time, the zoning has been chipped away at, and you can see all those gray areas represent changes from R to I-2 approved by the Planning Commission. We actually did have one rezoning that moved the opposite direction, where the Planning Commission rezoned a house from I-2 to R because the owner was not able to obtain mortgage financing for a house that was zoned I-2. But for the most part, the trend has been moving away from residential towards light industrial uses. And so the applicant here has no interest in redeveloping these lots residentially and contends that they're not suitable for residential new home construction. Our observation is that the trend on Prospect and Van Horn has been away from housing and toward construction of new contractors' facilities. And if you look at the railroad tracks, the adjacent I-3 zoning, the gravel streets, doesn't make this a real attractive location for new residential development. So the question as to this suitability is whether you think this is suitable for future residential use or conversion to an industrial use. If we look around the area, we have 4 remaining residences on Van Horn. We have one business that's a landscape contractor on the north side of Van Horn that is zoned residential but is a grandfathered in business. Crown Distributors occupies almost the entire south side of the street. So directly across the street from this property is Crown Distributors warehouse. We also have railroad tracks at the end of the street, and south of the tracks we have a construction yard for Bus Boom and Rao. So what we've seen over the years is that having several vacant lots, a mix of uses, unpaved streets, and closeness to Ohio Street has made this an attractive area for small businesses with contractors' offices and storage facilities. Most houses in this area, while modest, have been well maintained, but there are a number in this area that are in substandard condition. Our experience is that the neighbors are not necessarily objectionable to the introduction of small businesses. Their primary concern is that truck traffic generated by those businesses sometimes stir up dust and travel at speeds that they don't think is respectful of their residential setting. So again, the question for you is whether the nature of the development that the applicant is proposing is compatible with the development in the surrounding area. We do have a sanitary sewer line that serves Van Horn Street. There's a 6-inch water main on the south side of Van Horn, which serves the area. It's capable of serving this site. There are no storm sewers in this area and really no defined ditches. This area is very flat and the drainage is poor. What positive drainage there is moves towards the railroad tracks and then drains back to the west. The closest storm sewers are located in Ohio Street. Van Horn is a platted public street. It's got the full 60 feet of right-of-way. It's a sand and gravel surface, has no shoulders. The road surface is not particularly good. It is considered an approved public street for building permit purposes and is publicly maintained. As we noted, there are 4 existing homes and 1 existing business on the north side of Van Horn. Crown Distributors has its primary access from Ohio Street. So the other thing that we would want to look at here, Dustin, if you could perhaps, have you been able to locate the comprehensive plan map? What we'd like to identify here is that the comprehensive plan essentially shows this area as part of a very large, what they refer to as the Northeast employment area. And so we are kind of sandwiched right in this area here, and you will see that there's no future residential shown in the comprehensive plan, so it's not identified as an area that would be targeted for residential redevelopment or infill residential. So as if we looked at this case, it would create an isolated I-2 zone parcel surrounded by residential zoning. However, the trend in this area is away from residential towards light industrial uses. The comprehensive plan does not encourage new residential housing in this area. So we've identified some suggested findings. As one, this property does meet the dimensional requirements for an I-2 development lot and has public street access. It's adjacent to existing I-3 zone property on the south, and there are grandfathered contractors' offices in the vicinity to the north and to the east. The property is not suitable for residential redevelopment because of the surrounding environment, and the request for I-2 zoning conforms with the comprehensive plan. So again, this is a unique property. We think that this request would allow a mostly vacant tract, which is unlikely to be developed residentially, to put into productive use, and the change to business use is consistent with the trends in the area. Certainly in the alternative, you could recommend denial of the requested zoning change based on alternative findings, or you could postpone consideration of this request if you feel like additional information is needed for you to make a recommendation. So with that, we'd be happy to put up any additional slides or graphics that you would like to take another look at, but Van Horn is a public street, publicly maintained, and provides legal public access to this lot, and so there are no reasons why this lot could not be redeveloped for another purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Is the applicant here?
I think he's represented by his realtor.
Are you representing him? Are there questions for staff?
I have one, and I think you began to answer it about it being a spot zoning, but my bigger question is, I agree that it doesn't look like a good residential area, but why wouldn't we just rezone the whole area and then make the existing houses be non-conforming in an I-2 area? Because we're going to get to do this again and again and again. I'm afraid as these houses go out of service and somebody else decides they want to build another.
Well, one of the reasons that we have not done that or not initiated that is the reason that we gave, and that would be this one right here. So I have a recollection of that. That was formerly zoned I-2, and the Planning Commission rezoned it to residential, and the problem you would run into is if you blanket rezoned all the residential units there, you would make it much more difficult for the residents who live there to refinance a home or to sell it, and for the buyer to obtain a mortgage, because one of the things that a lender is concerned about is if a house were more than 50% damaged by fire or something like that, could it be rebuilt? And if all the houses were zoned I-2, then if something happened to the house, it couldn't be rebuilt, and lenders tend to take a dim view of that.
I don't disagree with your rationale, but the same rationale applies to if I go and try to finance a home that's surrounded by industrial area, it's not going to happen either. I think it's a part of the community that is turning over. The comprehensive plan strongly suggests that we let it turn, but I guess we'll do it slowly. That was my only comment.
Yeah. What we've generally done is we have done it when a property owner requests it, but we haven't done it initiated from the top down.
No, but we talked about it.
Yes.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Yes.
Under public utilities, sanitary sewer, you say that it is served, you said, but it terminates 300 feet west. I mean, is that a concern? And then I was wondering, with this business, what do they do with their wastewater? Would they dump it there?
I'm not familiar with how the steam cleaning business would operate, but it is what we would prefer is that those types of things be discharged into the sanitary sewer system and not the storm sewer system. The good news is there's no storm sewer system here, so there's no temptation for that to occur. But we don't know the specifics of the use of the building. The applicant's representative may have a better idea for if this is going to be used for offices or anything other than the storage of vehicles and such. It's designed to have some overhead doors, but it's not clear to us at this point whether this would be a office that would have office and plumbing facilities and that. We were just pointing out, I think you had that turned on there, Dustin, that the sewer terminates right here or close to there. It doesn't go all the way to the end of the street. And so the uses that are at the east end of the street are just open storage contractors uses that don't have any facilities that need public sewer service. But
Mr. Bath?
Yes, was the public notified of this hearing?
they were public notification of letters sent and also a sign
Sign.
posted on the property.
Yeah, I saw the sign.
What is the definition of spot zoning?
Well, if you could go back, Dustin, to our... If you weren't taking, or this was not supported by what the comprehensive plan certainly shows, is that we have, this is the piece right here, and you'll see that everything on the north boundary is residential. These two lots on the east are residential. These lots on the west are residential. So if you look at this mass of yellow here, you'll see that there's no I-2 lot that this is contiguous to. And spot zoning is basically creating an isolated parcel that has zoning that's unrelated to what's around it. So as a general planning principle, spot zoning or creating an isolated district that's not related. On the other hand, you have I-3 zoning across the street, and then this piece right here, although it is zoned residential, is used by George Garacki basement contractors, so it is a contractor's use. It's just a pre-existing non-conforming use. So if you look at it from that standpoint, you would be creating another area of gray on that map, but it would not be touching any other or contiguous to any other I-2 zoned property. So if you were rezoning this parcel here, it's contiguous to I-2, but here we're simply pointing out that it's a standalone parcel that's going to be I-2, and it's going to have residences on either side of it.
So it is spot zoning. And I'm not against this, but I'm just...
From the technical definition of what spot zoning is, it's not contiguous to any other I-2 areas, but on the other hand, every trend in this area is away from R and towards I-2.
And Mr. Andrew, how long has it been R2 or R1? It's R1, right?
Since 1977, it has been zoned.
So the things that are operating were there before, this concrete place? That was prior to 1977.
There is a, there used to be a masonry contractor down here at the end of Van Horn. It's now Naturescapes. And then in here, in an kind of an L-shaped parcel, is George Garacki Basement Contractors. That predated 1977. This masonry contractor So what the Planning Commission decided to do in 1977 was to make all the businesses non-conforming. What Mr. Boxa was talking about was making all the residences non-conforming, because the trend is the other way. But right now we have a mixed use neighborhood with a trend away from residential and towards small business.
Other questions for staff? Not. We'll hear from the applicant. Mr. Ross, if you'll approach the microphone, please. State your name and address.
Chris Rost, 5001 North Crystal Springs Road, Salina. Here representing the applicant, John Armada. And I expected him to be here today. I don't know what happened, but anyway, as far as his intended use, from what I understand, is for the storage of his cleaning vans. They may have a small office space, potentially restrooms. They may hook onto sewer and water, but I don't know if they'll do that in the beginning or not. You've got his plans are for the property, the type of structure that he's going to build, the size. I guess from an overall standpoint, and maybe this is pertinent, maybe this is not, as far as having this property listed for sale, there has been no interest in potentially putting a residence there. The only interests that I've had are for similar uses, either a storage building for campers, things of that nature, or for a small business to be put there. And quite frankly, people are surprised that it's not zoned correctly already. They're surprised it's residential zoning. So just based on driving through the neighborhood. So I don't know if anybody has any specific questions. I'll try to answer.
Are there questions for Mr. Rost?
I had one, Mr. Rust, and I'm going by Mr. Amador's application. We have a picture in our packet of a Morton building, which is what he intends to put in, evidently, and he mentions 8 bays. Then, as a part of on the front page, he mentions, I want to quote him correctly, that he doesn't foresee increase in traffic, and as far as parking, should be a minimum of 50 feet of parking to the west in front of each storage room. I'm looking to the west. That end nearest us would be the west end, I'm assuming, of that building. Does he mean that there are going to be 8 bays on that west end, the smaller end of the building? Is that what, can you shed any light on that?
No, I think it'd be on the opposite side. It'd be on the long side of the building.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
Because I don't think you would get 8 bays on a 30-foot. You're not going to get 8 bays along a 30-foot section of building. If it's going to be 30 by 60, I believe is what the.
Is the lot 200 feet?
It's 203 feet.
So if you're only occupying 60 feet, is that correct?
That would be what the building
60
would.
building?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so-
building would be.
Still have 140 feet left.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I guess he anticipates parking in front of the building, those bays being on the long side.
Correct.
When he says to the west, I'm wondering if he maybe is turned around in directions as I get to be sometimes. I don't know.
Well,
But I was just trying to
I
figure
don't
that
know
out.
if he's going to, I mean, as far as placement on the lot, I don't know if he had talked to staff about that or not.
Well,
as far as-
that would be my
Well-
question. Certainly he's not planning on having that run north-south, is he? I'm assuming the building will be placed east-west.
I don't, That I would hate to answer.
Mr. Andrew, if we were,
My guess would be he would place it north-south,
I would too.
so that there could potentially be another storage building put up there in the future. I believe the,
Oh,
okay, hold on just a second, Mr.
Right.
Rost. Are we deciding any of that, or are we just deciding if this is to
No,
be
you're,
zoned?
you're just
And
deciding
then they'll have
whether
to
it's
come back with the
appropriate.
site plan.
He will have to, at some point when he's ready to build a building, he will submit a site plan, and Mr. Hers and I will review it to make sure that parking and
'Cause
setbacks and all
obviously,
of
we don't
that.
have any of that information.
Right. And
So,
we can't tell you if it'll be one
and I don't
building.
want to speculate about
There's
it. for
room
an
to
hour.
put two buildings on this property. But again, the use of the building is going to dictate parking. And if you have an office and restrooms and things like that,
Which
then
they
you'll
will need with a
you'll
large
need-
building.
Yeah, and if you just have
Yeah.
non-climatized storage, that's another matter. But
right.
right now, you are just being asked to decide whether this is
Right.
more suitable for residential redevelopment or redevelopment in some light industrial form.
Yeah,
And
the
I
chair,
think-
chairman has a good point, and that's
Yeah,
very
'cause
true.
we just don't have that
But I
information
was just
tonight.
trying to
Yeah.
visualize what this would look like as far as how it
Well, we'll
affects
get to
the
see
appearance
it
of the
again,
neighborhood.
probably.
Yeah.
I would assume so, and I think the applicant has every intention of meeting the requirements of this body as far as whatever they build there and doing a nice job. So
But you, as a real estate broker, are saying that its best and highest use would be industrial.
yes, and for the city as well, you
Any
get more
oth-
tax dollars off of that.
Well, throw that right in there. Any other questions for Mr. Rost? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll call the public hearing closed and bring it back up here for discussion. Mr. Baksha.
Well, the fact that there are no people here who have residences in that area tells me that they're not concerned about it, and I guess I shouldn't be either. I mean,
But
that's,
yet
I
you
mean,
are.
it's just that. No, I think it is just that
There's a
simple.
panorama of
I know, but we're
residences.
going. I would just like for us not to have a public hearing every time somebody decides to convert another lot. But other than that, that's my only hesitancy at all. Yeah, thanks.
And we did not hear from anyone,
Yeah.
another
Nobody-
form,
I had
letter or email.
I had
or-
a conversation with a gentleman who was outside the 200-foot notification area, and he was not concerned about what was happening on Van Horn. He was concerned about the speed of traffic on Prospect. So I referred that to a different group, and he was not concerned about the use, though.
Okay.
Any other questions or thoughts? We did not really get the issue answered for Commissioner Good resolved or about waste.
Oh, no, that's all right. It just, the way it was worded when you said, but instead of and, you said, served by an 8-foot clay sewer line, but it terminates 300 foot west, so I didn't know if that,
Yeah. We were just trying to explain that the sewer does not go the entire length of Van Horn. So
but that's not a problem, right? I mean,
Not for this property. This property has sewer directly across the street. So it has sewer service. The house that was there before had sewer service and water service. So this is capable of being served and having fire protection.
great.
Ready?
I move we approve application Z16-9, changing zoning from R1 to I2.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application Z16-9, changing zoning from R single-family residential to I2 light industrial. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor vote aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rost.
For your benefit, Chris, this is a recommendation. It will go to the governing body on the 23rd of January. So this is a recommendation to approve that will go to them for final approval.
And that is our only item for public hearing tonight, so we'll continue with administrative items. Our item being a review of our proposed 2017 capital improvement plan projects for comprehensive plan conformance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the roles of the Planning Commission in terms of being the custodian of the city's comprehensive plan is that the state Planning, Zoning, Enabling Act requires that whenever a planning commission has adopted and certified a comprehensive plan, that no public improvement, public facility, or public utility of a type embraced within recommendations of the plan shall be constructed without first being submitted to and approved by the Planning Commission as being in conformity with the comprehensive plan. And the idea being that if our current comprehensive plan does not show the city of Salina growing to the north or to the northwest because of floodplain considerations and other considerations, so if the city, as part of the CIP, was proposing a major utility extension or lift station or things to serve an area that's not shown as part of our future growth area, then that would be an improvement that is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. So what we are presenting to you today is a list of what we would consider major infrastructure projects and asking you to review those and make a recommendation as to their conformance with the comprehensive plan. So what we would like to do is just scroll through these as they are on the screen, and I'll kind of summarize these. Some of these are ongoing items. Some of them are one-time things. I think you are familiar with the fact that even though we have much infill property in the central part of the city, the historic heart of the city, a lot of those existing water lines are up to 100 years in age. Some of them have been deteriorating. Some of them are blocked or partially occluded. And so on an ongoing basis, the city has been replacing those. And there's estimates that the city has about 228 miles of cast iron water line that they're trying to replace. And so if you do the math of replacing 8 miles a year, it would take 28 years to replace all the cast iron stock that we have, but it is an ongoing thing. For 2017, about $4 million has been set aside for that purpose. Related to that and related to having a adequate and high quality and reliable water supply to support not just growth but just the overall quality of life in the city, there is proposal to activate and improve the South Well Field and the water plant that is at the corner of Waterwell Road and South Ohio Street. And so there was a design aspect of that was part of the capital improvements program. That design phase is complete. There is now a detailed engineering design for the facilities and a cost estimate. And as far as the construction phase of that, the estimated cost is about $32 million, which will be paid through a KDHE loan and then repaid over time. But the location of that is the southeast corner of Schilling Road, or not Schilling, Waterwell Road in South Ohio.
So the cost, total cost might be $32,000, but for 2017, it's only going to be a portion of that.
Right. The overall project cost is $32 million, but the idea is that we are at the we've completed the design phase, so once property is acquired and all that, then it would begin in the construction phase. It would occur in phases, but the ultimate construction cost is $32 million.
So we don't have a cost of what it would be for 2017.
Well, if the project is bid, the dollar amount is going to be for what the bid is for that phase. But in terms of the capital improvement program is figuring out what the total cost of the project is and establishing the method of financing up front, and at the projected total cost of all South Wellfield improvements is $32 million. And since it's all going to be paid through a public water supply loan, then the budget impact will be down the road in terms of the individual annual payments that are made from the water wastewater fund.
But it won't affect the capital budget.
It's not going to knock funds away from other capital projects. One that has increased in terms of the funding available is street surface improvements. This is proposing to allocate $3.7 million of sales tax funds for street surfacing improvements. The other project listed there is, again, the design phase for the Smoky Hill River Renewal Project. I think this could be looked at as trying to find the potential highest impact location and coming up with a preliminary design for removing sediment, trash, and debris and reshaping the banks. And then having a place for an accessible hike and bike path and provide a community gathering place along the downtown portion of the channel. So we think that the focus for the first phase would be somewhere near the downtown area, but the preliminary design is going to be for all the phases. So you would have a preliminary design for the whole project, and then you would get into final design for, again, in phases. But this allocates $1.25 million for paying for preliminary design of those in-channel improvements. Another project that is intended to be funded is Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and that would be to identify, select, and hire a consultant to assist with developing a overall Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That's been a project that's been identified a number of years ago, but is proposed to be funded in this year's plan. We have a project for reconstructing Country Club Road, and that would start it on Marymount from Iron East and then back to the east over to Eastboro. And while this will not have a bike path, it will have bike lanes as part of the Country Club Road construction, because that is identified on your bicycle master plan as a preferred route for cyclists. And that would be $1.4 million, and you can see the sources would be a combination of local and KDOT or federal exchange funds. There's also $50,000 set aside to look at preliminary design for perhaps making modifications to the medians and different aspects of Broadway Boulevard. $100,000 set aside to make park improvements prior to completion of the master plan. And then annually there are funds set aside to do additional segments of the hike-bike trail. And then the other project identified was making some improvements to the police department firing range out on West Old Highway 40. If you're familiar with that property, it used to be an animal shelter and then was converted into a police firing range, but it's not in great condition, and so there's a need to upgrade those facilities. So that is kind of our summary of what we identified as the 10 major infrastructure projects in the 2017 plan. So with that, I'd be open to any questions or comments about that. We have provided you with the full packet of information that the City Commission received, and one of the thickest sections in that is projects for further review. Those are projects that have been brought up or identified but have not, there's no source of funding, it's not on any timetable. So those are, might you say, they're good ideas that have been brought up, but no source of funds identified, no timeline identified.
I have one question. I thought we had seen plans and designs for the gateway things that have been done. So why are those pushed farther into the future in terms of implementing those? Because I noticed that some of these things for 2017 are nothing more than design or plan stages.
I believe we've had a change of heart at KDOT about interstate gateway signs. I think Mr. Stack can update you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one that has been kicked down the road a ways due to federal requirements that KDOT has to follow for highway signs on interstate highways, really. So it's not very easy to put a interstate sign on the right of way for a state highway. Some of the ones you'll see, like McPherson, for example, are on private property. So those are actually outside the fence line and they're further off the road. So those still have requirements, but they're different than actually putting them in the state right of way or on, basically interstate property. So right now we don't have any requirements that we know of. So KDOT has put a halt on it. They said they don't know what the rules are, so we got to wait till the rules get developed from the feds, which then KDOT has to develop their guidelines, which then come to us. So it's been delayed, I guess you'd say, in that regard. And also the commission is not interested in doing those for money reasons this year. So they felt like putting them out to 2018 was one of the things that had to get bumped, basically.
So, thank you. So are the things on this list the things that the commission thinks are worthy financially? Is that what we're looking at?
These are the ones that have been identified as priorities for 2017. You have others that we have some that have been, there's one project on here that was in the 2015 CIP, and it has been bumped down the road. So that occurs, but what is proposed here in this list are the major projects, which either the design or the construction would be let in 2017, and then you have a series of these: the street improvements, the water line improvements, the hike and bike trail, park improvements. Those are things that are budgeted would occur on an annualized basis. But the one-time expenditures would be the South Wellfield improvements, design for Smoky Hill renewal, the hike bike, or the Parks and Recreation master plan, the Country Club Road reconstruction. Some of those, and Mr. Stack can speak to that, but some of those are, the timing is based on availability of KDOT or federal exchange funds, and so we schedule it according to when we can receive funding for them. And I think that's the case with Country Club.
It is with Centennial. We just finished up this year, and then Country Club's kind of the next on our list. And the commission looked at these all November timeframe, basically. So I think your question was, has the commission kind of prioritized or funded some of these? And that's as their proposed funding. So once they go through that process and propose it, then it comes to you all and then back to them for a final CIP approval, basically, in the early part of this year. So that's, hopefully I answered your question anyway.
So our responsibility is to confirm that these are in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
Right. What I've identified
not to determine priority or
the first course of action would be to identify these. If you agree that they are within consistent with the growth areas and the comprehensive plan, then a motion should be made to, we have attached a resolution there that basically finds the list of projects to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. We also noted there that after reviewing the list, the Planning Commission may wish to provide comments to the Commission about any particular projects it believes are especially important. So, step one would be a motion as to the conformance with the comprehensive plan. However, in your minutes or through other ways, if commissioners have opinions about priorities or moving priorities or those types of things, those can certainly be stated, and they will be recorded, and the minutes obviously communicated to the governing body. However, your statutory role is to determine that the proposed investments are consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it's up to the governing body to prioritize them in terms of expenditure of funds.
Well, my assumption, I guess, would be that if they're on this list, they're in conformance with the plan. Or they wouldn't have reviewed them, they wouldn't have been budgeted, and we wouldn't be seeing it, right? So, really, yeah, let's go on. Did you have something?
No,
Because I just see us
I was
signing
going
something.
to say, I'm assuming that you're telling us that these do conform as far as you are concerned with the
Precisely.
comprehensive plan.
Right. Part of staff's role here in reviewing these and presenting the report and preparing the resolution for your consideration is this section 2 there is that the commission finds that the major projects proposed are consistent with the future land use map, the urban service area map, and the goals and policies in the plan. And so our review is that there's no project here that is outside the bounds of the recommendations of the plan. We can all have an opinion or agree on what should be prioritized in terms of timing, but our review of this found that every project on this list is either the development of a Parks and Recreation master plan is actually a specific recommendation in the comprehensive plan. So that is definitely consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. I said that it is the state statute gives that or delegates that judgment to the Planning Commission, not the governing body, as to the conformance. But there have been several study sessions with the governing body where this set of projects were prioritized for 2017.
And as a matter of history, I remember that in previous actions like this at the beginning of the year, there has been, I believe that we have voted that they were in conformance, approved that resolution, but with some comments about what we thought might be improvements in the future, et cetera.
We did exactly, and I wish we had those comments now, because I'd like to see the last 2 years' comments that we made and where they fall on this list.
Just need to dig back through those
Right.
minutes.
I will next year, don't worry.
Well,
Next year I'll bring them with me.
Right.
Because that's my point here,
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
I see a list of things that we're supposed to sign off on, but I also recall some in-depth discussions about things that we thought should take place. And I don't see that they're necessarily, and I understand the timing and logistics may not make them necessary, but yeah, I
But the thing is, we are asked to just say yes to these.
exactly.
And anything else would just be commentary that,
And I would
it
like to
has
see the
no weight.
commentary
Yeah,
go
true.
somewhere or
In-
not bother
Yeah.
making it.
In the past, the Planning Commission has made it very clear that gateways and enhancing gateways is a very high priority for the Planning Commission. I believe the City Commission is aware of that, but because of some obstacles that the Federal Highway Administration threw up relating to the plan for getting the interstate gateways started, those were moved down the road till they can come up with
Yeah.
guidelines that we can either conform with or tell you that we can't conform with them, and we have to look to private property instead of the right-of-way.
So
But
I had
from
a
the
question.
standpoint of priority, it looks to me like they are putting it as a medium-low one because they're just doing one gateway each year and the next 4.
That's the way,
Subsequent
that's the way it
years.
was originally designed, to do it in phases.
Oh, was
But
it?
unfortunately, the
Okay.
phases are getting
Yes.
moved. And it's unfortunate the federal government decided to do what they did. From the governing body's standpoint, it may have been fortunate that they did, because I think there was very little appetite at the local level to spend the money on those. So that's my comment,
But
and it's in the minutes, and if someone wants to read that, that's fine. But they're not there for more than just the federal government's reason.
Well, and it's my understanding there were 4 gateway signs, and only 2 were involved with the interstate system. Why couldn't we proceed to the other 2? Well, I believe one was on Magnolia and one was on South 9th.
No, the 4 locations identified, one was on US 81 coming southbound, one was on I-135 coming northbound, one was on I-70 coming eastbound, and one was on I-70 coming westbound.
That's correct.
Those were the 4 locations. Two on I-70, one on I-135, and one on US 81 to the north.
So why don't we do the US 81?
Because
Well,
it's
that's
the
a question for
same,
Mr.
the
Stack.
same guidelines
Same
would
problem, yeah.
apply.
I thought it was just interstate.
Yeah, 81, actually, Jim is here today. He might know that better than me, but 81 and I-35, I'm not sure where they are different, but it's somewhere north of Salina, so I think it's still considered interstate or federal government right-of-way or highway in that case, so it's not a lot different.
So Dan, a question I had related to that, I'm thinking, and this may have been part of the discussion before, either privately or in the commission meeting, but the Flint Hills Gateway signs, am I to understand that those are on private land then, off from KDOT
Yeah,
regulation?
and I'll let Jim, do you know the answer to that, Jim? I don't. You don't? Okay, because there's some that,
My,
the first ones are
my
on private
research showed
property.
that they are in the public
Public right-of-way.
interstate
The Flint
right-of-way.
Hills one is?
Yes, and they were actually partially financed by KDOT.
Okay, those were the original, those were
Right.
the new ones, or the original early ones. Olathe has one off of K7 on an interchange, so I know of a few of them. And then it was almost like, well, everybody wanted one of those. Well, now we can't, now we got to come up with some rules. And not that that's the case, but that's, a lot of times that's what happened. There's a demonstration project and demonstrated, and then it was, not everybody can do this. We have to come up with some rules on how it should work and how it should be not distractive to the driver. I mean, there's a lot of challenges with signs on highways, so they'd have to make sure it's not too many of them. But we understand that it is a priority by you all, so that's good. It's good to know. I'm hearing that today, that it hasn't been as much of a priority maybe at the state level, or we haven't pushed it. So maybe we ought to be more pushy
Yeah,
to
I think we need
the
to push
federal.
it, and then
Yeah,
maybe they'll
push it.
respond rather
Right.
than just postpone it.
Right, yeah. It's
Especially we
like,
have 2 state legislators on the Transportation Committee.
yeah, that could help us as well, yeah.
Moving off of that, because we're kind of banging our head
Beat
against
that
it.
one.
Everybody agree? We have
all heard
Well,
signs
you know,
on the
my
highway.
only curiosity is,
Yeah,
and it's just a curiosity. I'm not trying to. In my little sharp pencil here, it looks like we're doing about 5 million plus of street improvements. And my question is, instead of just doing that in one nice little block here, we've got street improvements, then we've got country club road improvements, then we have Broadway studies. Is that because of the idea that, for example, our street improvements aren't dependent on KDOT? If they're going to fix the street in front of my house, that's not a KDOT issue, but the country club might be a KDOT issue.
Correct.
And Broadway might be a KDOT issue. Okay.
Correct. Yeah,
Now I
the
understand now.
KDOT federal funds have to kind of have their own separate, yeah, it's not as.
So we account for them just.
Count for them a little differently, and so it shows how we're getting the money and how we're spending it just for those purposes. Actually, it's gotten easier they allow you to spend it on more stuff than they used to. So it actually is easier than it used to be, but for our purpose, it's easier just to say this, we're going to use it for this project and
It's
keep
easier
our.
just to keep them in separate categories.
Yeah.
I just found that kind of interesting that we were talking roads. Three
Yeah,
out of 10
yeah,
things were
right.
roads, and so I'm thinking,
Yeah, and the $3.7 million is kind of a major emphasis
right.
because of the sales tax that was passed. So that you want to show people that we're spending, it used to be 1.7, now it's 3.7. They've upped it by $2 million to spend as a sales tax on streets. We also have gas tax money that's doesn't show up here at about $950,000 as well. So we're doing around $4.5 to a little bit over $4.5 million of street work every year just streets in front of your house, overlays, the black tar, and all that just is under street work. So those kind of it's a lot of work, but it's not the glamorous stuff like Country Club Road will be a nice upgrade that you'll notice more so than maybe the other stuff.
So I had a question that I think is related similarly to the source of funding, and it would be, is my understanding correct that, for example, the hike bike trail, the river improvements, Parks and Rec master plan, et cetera, some of those that come out of sales tax, are those partly prorated and budgeted by the amount of expected income from the just passed sales tax initiative?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's nice that they've able to start the Parks Master Plan, because I think that's been on this group's minds since I've been here, and that's pretty
Right.
exciting to actually have the opportunity to start master planning parks a little more. And so that was a huge part of the sales tax. It's not a huge number yet, but it's part of the sales tax that was passed. Hike and bike trail has been kind of ongoing. Can't remember what other one did you just say, but there's
Yeah. Some of
a few
those.
others.
Yeah. Some of those general improvement, not just street improvements. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting to get to start on those basically with the new sales tax.
But Dan, do I understand right that you think the amounts might increase significantly according to sales tax revenue in future years?
Well, the sales tax was passed on kind of, so many for this portion of street work and so much for this portion of parks work.
Right.
And then I think economic development was part of it, and
Right.
the Smoky Hill River Master Plan, as well as the Smoky Hill River improvements, were part of. There was a lot of different categories that we're trying to track and make sure that we honor those commitments, and so that's why they're broke out in here, and you can see here's the numbers, and
Yeah.
there's going to be an accounting every year of that, basically from the
Yeah.
commission's perspective on how much
Yeah.
do we take in and where did it go
Commitments as to allocated percentage.
for
To
each
each of these projects.
different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
quite a few different categories. Broadway is an interesting one because I think that's been on the radar for a long time with those medians on North Broadway, and they're just really ugly and old. And one of our commissioners, they're hard to see, so it's their old black asphalt medians, and so that's an interesting one because it'd be nice to just overhaul that and start over, but the development up there is changing, and that's where you all come in with the future plan is maybe different than what's there now. So that's not an easy one to say, yeah, let's just go remove them or put them in or put them here and here and then
So
block
we
some
can-
access for somebody
we
else.
discussed that, and maybe Mr. Andrews should be here because that was going to be my next point, but you may be
Okay.
able to answer the question. Because what we have said as a commission is if we need to be looking at these areas like North Broadway and that corridor as they redevelop in order to meet the comprehensive plan,
Right.
then perhaps we need some kind of study or some kind of idea of what we need to do in terms of actually looking at zoning issues that affect nonconformance with the plan currently and will in the future before we can determine how we're going to develop the streets in the middle of those plans and
Right.
places. And this is $50,000 for a project design for the Broadway streets themselves, but I'm still wondering where are we allocating or getting money to look at how to make the entire area around there cohesive so that it fits the plan.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
I mean, I've asked that question before,
Yeah.
but the money doesn't ever come anywhere, and I don't know where that, comes from. But I don't know how. If we don't know how it's changing, and we don't know how we can redistribute zoning so that it matches the plan, because it doesn't match the plan,
Right.
and those centers that we have there aren't actually able to be neighborhood centers because they're other sorts of
Yeah, not
properties
yet.
currently.
Right.
Don't we need to have some kind of planning process that determines that?
I'll let Dean or Dustin handle more than the street work that we're focusing on does kind of fit
It's like
in.
a secondary to the
It is a
fact
little bit. It is a
that
little
we
bit.
don't
but it-
have a cohesive zoning plan that
Probably,
allows
yeah.
us to actually meet the comprehensive plan.
Well, where those two things dovetail is that any sort of preliminary design plans that would affect the physical geometrics of Broadway Boulevard is going to involve probably a number of public meetings and getting input and all from existing landowners. What we have discussed, and we can start 2017 with a study session on it, is a study session on that corridor from Crawford to the Broadway Viaduct and show you the difference between what's there and what's proposed and what the square footages are and who the owners are, and then maybe Mr. Box's idea can be initiated there as opposed to the Cloverdale area, because what you would be looking at is essentially a down zoning of the Broadway corridor, which would make a number of those properties non-conforming. So if you want to get the attention and participation of property owners in the Broadway corridor, combine physical changes to the street with potential reclassification of their zoning, and that will certainly get their attention and participation.
I think we should
And I just don't
Think
want to
so.
go out and start beating a bear with a stick. But at the same time, I think that can be done if we have a plan that would if I were a property owner right now and I happen to own some commercial property, and in my humble opinion, there's a little bit more of that on Broadway than we'll ever need. I'm not really anxious to have you downzone that to something else, because I'm going to be feeling like you have just reduced the value of commercial property. But if we can present owners in those areas with a vision of what that property could be worth at a time in the future when the development was done, I think we switched from hitting a bear with a stick to maybe tickling them with a feather. And that, I'm all for doing the groundwork so that when we walk someplace we're ready to go, rather than just walk in someplace to take a beating. I don't want to do that.
And obviously, street design and traffic generation is different if the land use mix is going to be not
Exactly.
what it is today, but
Correct.
something different. If the long-term vision is for some sort of urban residential, then that has implications on the design and capacity of the street as opposed to continued retail commercial.
Our hope, too, would be to try to start the discussion, which we haven't even done before. We've talked about it at this level, but this is finally putting money towards that discussion to hire what we hope is a consultant that could help Dean and us, a planning group and an engineering group to kind of, they've dealt with this in other cities before, so come and get some help and some expertise, which can then help you guys start the discussion with what to do, and then we can actually have public meetings with the people to try to figure out who's interested, who's going to be
Well, those are all the
our
things
challenges.
that I would love to see happen.
Yes, and that's
in the near
really it's good to
future.
start that this year. So I know it's baby steps
The very
and it's
near
slow, but at least there's money allocated,
If
which we're
it's
pretty
going
excited
that
about.
way, great.
It's actually
I
gonna
just don't want to
to
see a little
move.
street study about a median planting.
That's true, and yeah, we need to
when
involve
it
the whole
needs
property.
to tie
right.
in the discussion
Right.
about what's going to be across the street from the median,
Right.
and
Right.
the fact that there's no purpose of that if it's going to be what's existing there now.
That's a good point, because, I mean, North Broadway was redeveloped to a 3-lane section, and I think they had a lot of public meetings on that. So I assume this would even be more comprehensive, because it's going to have to look at the zoning, the future zoning, and the current zoning. It has to look at that. So we see that coming this way. And from Dean's perspective, he might have a little
And
help
we
on this.
did
He
a-
usually has to do it all in-house, but we're going to try to hire somebody to help us. Dean.
We, in the case of that section of Broadway from North Street over to 9th Street, we did have study sessions with the Planning Commission and looked at all those things, existing non-conforming uses, properties that were non-conforming for other reasons. In that case, the biggest changes there was that we realigned a whole bunch of street intersections and changed the configurations of property and things like that.
Access,
But
access was huge there.
we agree, and I'm sure that was Dan's experience in Overland Park, is that you can't have a corridor study and ignore the physical condition of the street, but you also can't do a corridor study and ignore everything that's behind the right-of-way line. So anything that happens there is going to have to match up the street design with the land use plan.
Well, I remember the discussion about the rezoning or maybe the allowing platting of the multi-use office space that now exists to the west of Crawford, about halfway between. And it looks a lot better. It looks a lot cleaner with that new construction, of course, and that's part of it. And to borrow on Commissioner Box's delightful metaphors, I think that if we can find the right people to tickle with that feather, that's an important part. If you tickle them with the feather and the cash falls out of their pocket, then yeah, well,
Long ways.
Yeah, but having a vision for that investors could buy into, I agree, is important.
Yeah, I do.
And I'm trying to think. I'm blanking on the term that we have for the Crawford and Broadway intersection in particular as some
It's a
sort of center. What is the term?
Community center.
Thank you, community center.
Yes.
And I think there's potential for that there. But again, having people who will build around that. We've got a Korean restaurant now fairly close by. I hope they can keep on going. So that kind of mixed use would be helpful.
And what about the 9th Street corridor, which is a major access into our
section?
city?
The north one?
The north one, yes.
Yeah.
The one that comes off interstate, and you drive by all kinds of derelict properties and things that need to be redone.
We approved a farmer's
and-
market there at one time.
Well,
Didn't materialize. We did.
Yeah, but very few people, I don't think, are driving off the interstate for that particular
No.
purpose.
No.
But where is that project in the planning process?
I know you guys had some study sessions on it. That didn't make the list this year.
Are you referring to the area, say, between Thomas Park and the interstate, or are you referring
all
to
the way from St. John's
Yeah,
up?
north.
Okay. We have had 2, maybe 3 study sessions with the Planning Commission on North 9th out to the interstate, and also one with the City Commission. And of course, the driving thought there is that area between the levee and the interstate is all floodway, and it's never really going to develop with development. So the question is it nothing but a green belt from there to the interstate? Is the goal to eliminate the development that's there, or because we can't do anything to encourage that as a new development corridor, because the floodway is going to prohibit
So
any.
shouldn't we be looking to try to make it something attractive and eliminate the things that are
Well,
not attractive?
To speak to that, some of the discussion that we had at the time, and this was, these are visions. Again, it matters who owns it and what they're willing to do with it. But for example, multi-recreational fields and perhaps land devoted strictly to not farmers market, to community garden space, that would make it look attractive. We even talked about building a lake there one time. $65 million cost.
I totally get that, Mr.
Yeah.
Norman, but I don't see any of that.
Well, I understand that,
And
but
I
we
don't
don't have
see
the money for
anything
it.
in any of this anywhere. Where's 2000? Do I see that in here? Is there the project to turn that into a green belt?
We were
further
very
review or
eloquent in the
someplace?
minutes.
I'm missing it.
We painted great visual
I
graphics
could
of that.
be 100 years old before I see that happen on here. Well, I thought you had an answer.
I do, right there, see it?
No, I just keep expecting to. I go to a lot of meetings on this subject. I go to the North meetings. I
Yep.
hear all of these things, but I don't see anything tangible ever appear that is changing any of that.
I will say that as far as state of Kansas goes, the city of Salina was the first recipient of KDOT funds for landscaping enhancements, and the first KDOT funded landscape enhancements occurred at the 9th and I-70 interchange, as well as along the 9th Street corridor down to Thomas Park. That has all occurred in the right-of-way, but there has been little or nothing done on the private property side. But within the 9th Street right-of-way corridor itself, there have been landscaping and lighting enhancements, some of which we received a KDOT grant for.
I guess what I'm saying is it goes back to the same theory of the Broadway corridor thing, that the planning needs to be more expansive and needs to overlap into those private areas and involve those people and try to bring some kind of new concept to use of property there. Or it will deteriorate more. I don't see it getting better.
Well, there was,
Nope.
a few years ago, EPA had a technical assistance. They provided technical assistance and had some suggestions along that corridor also in the floodplain area. And one of the things I remember is like canopy of trees or porches on the houses, things along that 9th Street, North 9th Street.
And what happened with that?
Some of the things, North Salina Community Development has been going through that document and have checked off quite a few things, but not the North 9th Street part. It seems like I remember it also had like solar panel field in the floodplain.
Cool. I just think there's a ton of potential for something really interesting and something really vibrant for a long drive into Salina. It's a long drive if you're on the Interstate 2 into Salina through that. And I've known some people that have turned around because they called me from their car phone to tell me they were turning around and driving away. So I think we really need to think about that. But I talk about it all the time. A lot of talk.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that what we've been discussing would be the makings of the feedback that we wish to send on to the city commission or the governing body, I guess is the correct phrase. Is that what you're hoping that these discussions are
I'm
somehow
sure Mr. Andrew is recording
distilled?
this
Okay, yeah.
to add to
No,
our
so-
recommendation.
So then the floor is open to recommendations. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. I think sometimes recommendations come in unusual formats, and I'm hearing a lot of that right here. It's not just, gnashing of teeth. I think it's really trying to move the ball ahead, and I think
Yeah.
Well, I recall someone saying that one of the goals was to eliminate the 4th Street Railroad track, and I don't see that in this plan, and maybe it's further out than 5 years, I don't know, but I think that we should be starting to look at it right now to develop a study to study the advisability and feasibility of asking the railroad to leave and converting it into a linear park.
And I think I can understand why you would even be thinking that, because I think as we begin looking at some potential development in the southwest part, there were some tracks drawn on a piece of paper that might lead me to at least believe that someone has thought about what you've just said for quite a while. And yeah, I don't see that being on a list, even though it may get kicked down the road for a while. I agree with you.
Well, and then hand in hand with that, if it's not the southwest railroad loop, then maybe a transload facility could be had on the main spurs of the east-west railroad tracks. And, we look at that, we don't know what it would cost and whether it's feasible and whether we could get federal or state funding for it, or whether it could be done privately or municipally, but I think that we should be looking at that.
Agreed. Other thoughts?
This is not a recommendation, but I think that the direction of beautifying and providing more accessibility within the infrastructure, hike, bike trails, parks, and rec improvements, et cetera, that we mentioned, are a positive step. And I'm glad to see the city doing that. So,
Definitely.
And one last thing. If we're going to attract businesses downtown, I don't know if this is true, but I understand that there are some rents that are exorbitant because of the property taxes. And if property taxes are too high downtown, how are we going to, and consequently rents too, how are we going to attract businesses to relocate there if it's going to be too expensive? So I would like to see maybe some kind of tax abatement program for all businesses on the core area of downtown. And, of course, that would mean losing property taxes, but it might mean increasing sales taxes. And I think that we want to look at that too.
Is there a discrepancy between, does anybody know, is there a discrepancy between sales taxes downtown and, for instance, the malls and the commercial centers that are scattered out further? Is there any differential?
Mr. Story, do you have an opinion on that?
One of the things that needs to be looked at, what Trace Walker is going to be doing is building that motel. If you go down and look where the old school maintenance building was, where birth gauge apartments are, and all the houses that are in that area that are all going to be demoed out and cleaned up, Taco John's is going to be moving up here on Iron Street. That's going to make a dramatic difference in what downtown looks like. And just go drive by Oakdale Park now around the river and look at where the city's taken out all those trees. That's been a big, big difference and really cleaned up the area, and then they start getting the silt out. But a lot of that stuff, by the time they redo things in the way of the hotel, that sort of thing, that'll make a big difference. I don't think the tax thing is a big deal. I mean, I've been downtown for 30 years or better. I don't know that we've got a real tax problem downtown. And so I don't think I'd waste too much time worrying about that.
Property tax or sales tax?
Property tax.
But what about sales tax? We're asking if there's a discrepancy between sales tax in the more urban areas, the south, versus downtown. Is your question whether or not they're higher tax?
I was thinking
No,
it
it's
was
the same
property
tax.
taxes.
Property taxes.
Yeah. Property tax is what it is. It just like sales tax is what it is. So
And
You don't think it's not excessive?
I don't think so. No, like I said, I've been downtown for 30 years or better, and so
We just need a few thousand more feet down there every day, human feet.
that's going to make a big difference when
Well, and-
Walker starts doing his work.
maintenance and things like that is different, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
in an old building versus a
Right.
brand new cement building.
I understand that there's a restaurant downtown that pays $3,000 a month rent because their taxes on that property is $14,000 a year.
Which restaurant's that?
I shouldn't say,
Well,
so.
Let's don't.
Yeah, depending on the size of the building, that could be accurate. The property tax would be $14,000 a year.
Well, believing that the floor is still open for any further discussion about comments, I would move that we adopt Resolution 17.1 approving the capital improvement plan as in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
I would second that.
With the desired text, with the text in front of us,
With the text
with the text as written here.
as written here. It has been moved and seconded to approve the proposed 2017 capital improvement plan as presented as the text was written here. Any discussion?
I have one comment.
Yes, sir.
And it's aimed at this group. And I think you ought to all be very proud. And I think the city of Salina ought to be excited that there are individuals in volunteer commissions who have the enthusiasm and the vision to look for ways that the city can get better. And what that does is it begins looking like we're all dissatisfied. And dissatisfaction sometimes is the catalyst for change. So I want to applaud everybody before they vote on this, because I think it is the dissatisfaction and the creativity that's going to bring about change.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
A
Mr.
few
Bauer.
things quickly. If we're going to spend $32 million on the Southwell oil field,
Water
pay it
field.
off.
Water field.
Water, not oil.
But we're still looking for that one, too.
That'd be dangerous.
Yeah, why-
That would eliminate all our problems.
why aren't the
Jerry has
water-
ideas for that.
Water line improvements at $112 million over 28 years. I mean, if we're listing the total cost of the water supply, why aren't we listing the total cost of the sewer projects.
I'm not sure I
No, not
understand
sewer,
what.
but
Water-
water lines.
Water line improvements.
Yes,
Okay, that
Spread out
is
over
an
years.
that's an annualized
yeah.
expenditure. We're going to spend projected $4 million this year replacing old, outdated
Yeah.
water lines.
And that's
in-
going on
in
for
the-
28 years, right?
And that's going to be an annual expenditure that will probably, the 2021 Planning Commission will be looking at the CIP and seeing $4 million for water line
Well,
replacement.
it'll probably be 5 million because inflation will go up.
Could be.
All right, and then lastly, why can't the police department use the firing range at the highway patrol?
I cannot answer that
Well, I think
question, but I know that the city and the county sheriff use and has historically used the one out on West Old Highway 40.
Yeah.
It's been used that way since the 70s. It served a dual purpose as animal shelter and firing range, but it was brought into the city
My dog
separate.
That could be erased.
Well, and for the purposes of discussion, I would have
Not
said,
gonna land.
without knowing
move to
anything more than
Salina.
that, the question that Commissioner Buffa brings up is one that I have as well. I mean, if we're looking at $400,000 on that kind of a facility, is that not possible? And I assume city commissioners have looked at that. They have not. I see a no back there. Not possible. Okay.
Why not? Politics? Well,
Would you want to come to the microphone, Gary, and address that?
Mr. Hobby?
My experience before, while he's making his way up here, is that agencies, not just governmental agencies, but agencies involved with the practice of and discharge of firearms are very, very proprietary about their space. And it amazes me, very frankly, that the county and the city can agree to use the same spot. That amazes me. So,
That happens to be
but
the
you look
correct
at the
answer.
Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism, each individual lake around the state of Kansas, they have their own firing range, and it is theirs. And then the Corps of Engineers has another one, and it is theirs. It's
And
interesting.
that's the substance
The
of.
project
That
is
is the correct answer.
That's the substance of your
400,000.
understanding. Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't it
Yeah.
4.5 million?
No, this is just the engineering side.
Right. Then
Architecture.
next year follows with an actual $4.5 million
Potentially.
project.
And
Yeah.
the sales tax downtown is different than some of the other areas because, and the real estate taxes, there's a tax increment financing district, there's a community improvement district, there's a star bond issue project that's going on in downtown areas. So those sales taxes are all going towards the improvements of the downtown area, not necessarily to be able to use at the mall down on the south end of Salina or something like that. So they're basically freezing the real estate taxes, and any improvements then will go towards the tax increment financing project to help pay off improvements in a downtown area as well. So we're not going to see any real increase in real estate taxes downtown because we're freezing them basically at the base value of today. The improvements then, what increases the sales tax will be used towards the improvements in a downtown streetscape project and towards the river and that type of thing. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hobby. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this as presented. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor vote aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That is our administrative item. Are there other matters?
Based on your comments here, we will schedule and present to you a study session on Broadway corridor and North 9th Street corridor, and we will provide you with information about the ownership, the parcel sizes, the valuation, the zoning, the existing uses, and what the comprehensive plan vision is. And we'll start with those basic factual pieces of information so we can see how much property is at stake, how many owners are affected, and what the the conflicts are between existing uses and future land uses.
Excellent. Any other matters?
Yeah, I just want to say that I read the additional study materials at the back of the packet and made a conscious effort not to have my hands in front of my mouth the entire session, and I hope it showed. I think we all look more professional today.
Thank you. I was just into the car thing. Yeah, I'm all ready for a Google car.
Driverless cars, yeah.
Yes, your nonverbal communication can send a powerful message.
It was. I was working on that the whole time. I hope the public notices.
We will meet on the 17th, so we'll look forward to seeing you then. And at that session, we'll be doing part 3 of tiny homes and accessory dwellings.
Excellent.
At 2:30 or 4?
2:30. The study session, a regular session at 4. We have a street name change request out at the airport area affecting the airport terminal, so that will be your primary public hearing item.
Thank you. Well, everyone, welcome to 2017, and if there's no other business, we will adjourn.
I'm making a note right now.